Welcome back. I'm Jill with the carefreekitchen.com, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite recipe for baking powder biscuits. And these baking powder biscuits are tall and light and fluffy and perfect with a pat of butter or some homemade jam. Before we get started, be sure to like this video, follow me here, and share it with a friend. I'll show you all kinds of fun and easy recipes that your family will love. So to get started, here are the ingredients that you are going to need. Okay, so I have some regular all-purpose flour here. I have some salt, some baking powder. This is a little bit of extra flour for the counter when I'm rolling it out. And then I've got some milk, just some regular whole milk there. This is the little cutter that I will use to cut the biscuits. It's great to have one with nice sharp edges here. And then I have some really cold butter. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is preheat the oven for about 425 degrees. Okay, so I just have my flour here, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour in the baking powder and the salt, and then using a whisk, I'm just going to mix that all in. Okay, and then I'm just going to set this aside. Okay, and then for my butter, I'm just going to use about 1/3 of a cup of butter, and I'll just take it out of the wrapper here, and then I'm going to cut it into some smaller chunks, and you want to be sure and use really cold butter, and then that way the steam from the butter will make your biscuits really light and fluffy and flaky. Okay, so then I'm just going to add my butter to my flour. Okay, and then I'll just kind of use my knife here, get that all mixed in and kind of cut my butter in here. Okay, and if you have a pastry mixer, this is the perfect place to use a pastry mixer. I don't have one, so I'm just using 2 knives, and it works the same as a pastry mixer, just takes a little bit longer. Anyways, we're just going to cut this butter up until it is pretty mixed in here. And you just kind of want it to be like little chunks in there, little granules of the butter, without getting it warm with your hands. Okay, so there you can kind of see it's pretty ground up. The butter's kind of chopped up in there. Okay, then I'm going to add my milk. And we want to keep this really as light and fluffy as we can. So I'm just going to use a little fork here and bring all of my dough together. Okay, and the biggest complaint with baking powder biscuits is that they become kind of tough. So you can make this in a mixer, but it's much easier to ensure that you get light and fluffy biscuits if you just do it by hand. Okay, so now it's pretty mixed in here. I'm just going to use my hand to pick up the rest of this flour here in the bottom of my bowl. Okay, now we're just going to take a little bit of flour here and put on our counter. And then as I'm getting all of the little crumbs out of there, put it right there. Okay, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of flour on my rolling pin here too. Okay, now we want to roll this out until it's about a 1/2 inch thick, maybe 3/4 inch thick even. And again, the key is to not overwork your dough at this point. So that looks perfect. Okay, so then for my baking sheet, I just have a baking sheet that is covered in parchment paper here. I'm going to just use my cutter, and you want to be sure and go straight down. You don't want to twist it, otherwise those layers have a tendency to not be quite as fluffy. So just straight down. And you can just pop it out of there and try and get as many as you can on this piece of dough. And the amount of biscuits that you make will depend on how thick they are and then also the size of your ring. My ring here is 2 inches. Maybe it's 2.5. You can go a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller depending on what you're doing with your biscuits. And I'll get one more out of there. Okay, and then with the rest of the dough, you can try and get any excess flour off and then roll it up just enough so that you can get more biscuits out of it. Just be sure not to knead this dough. You can use a rolling pin or you can just use your hand here. And maybe I can get one more out of there. Perfect. Okay, and maybe one more biscuit there. There we go. Okay, and then before we get going anymore, what we're going to do is take your thumb and press down on the middle of each one of these biscuits, and that will help the edges rise a little bit more. There we go. And now I have my egg wash, and this is just 1 egg mixed in with some milk. I'm just going to brush the top, do kind of an egg wash here on top, and this will give it that nice deep golden color. This is such a great recipe to have with biscuits and gravy, or with just a little bit of butter and jam or honey butter, or you can even add just a little bit of sugar and then sprinkle some raw sugar on top and then make them into biscuits for strawberry shortcake. That's a really fun variation of this recipe. All right, now we're going to bake these in a preheated 425-degree oven for 12 to 14 minutes. Okay, here are my baking powder biscuits. As you can see, they are light and fluffy, flaky right there. The next thing that I like to do when my baking powder biscuits get out of the oven is I like to just brush them with butter just a little bit. These are golden and chewy on the outside and light and fluffy on the inside. They make the perfect addition to any dinner or breakfast recipe, and of course our favorite, sausage and biscuits. These baking powder biscuits are soft, fluffy, buttery, and so quick to make. With just a few steps, you'll have delicious homemade biscuits that will be much better than anything you can get in a can. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this recipe for baking powder biscuits. They really are so light and fluffy and tender and delicious. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.